Okay, welcome to the Bob
and Ramon
Guitar Show. Today's video is Bob's 5 favourite guitar players
and Ramon's 5 favourite guitar players.
Here we go. So
interleaved like the teeth in a zip.
Absolutely, we are such a great team. Let's start with you, Bob. So, and this doesn't have to be in any particular order. These are just like 5 guitarists. Maybe you're not going to think of all of the guitarists you like, but just 5 guitarists that you love. Big influence on you.
As my man says, this is unrehearsed, so it's unlikely to be pre-considered. There's probably faults in the argument, but just because I've been thinking about him earlier this afternoon, so I might say that one of my favourite guitar players, not probably my top guitar player, but Leslie West of Mountain.
And you're holding the very guitar the type of guitar.
Coincidence, I hadn't actually even realised I was until I am. And this is the guitar he played, a 50s Les Paul single cut junior. And he was a big man, and he made a fantastic, rich vocal tone, and his phrasing. He had big, fat fingers. He wasn't very technical.
Right.
He didn't do weird, flashy scales.
Uh-huh.
He just made beautiful, sweet music with lovely phrasing.
Wow.
Great
and any choice cuts of his? Would you recommend?
My favourite piece of theirs by far. They on an album called Climbing, Mountain covered a Jack Bruce song called Theme for an Imaginary Western, and for me that is the standout Mountain song. The solo on it is sublime.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So your first one.
So my first one. Well, I guess really going back when I was first learning the guitar, it's going to be pretty obvious really. But Peter Green,
who would be one of mine too.
Who would be one of yours?
Exception.
Yes. Well, Peter Green for me, when there was kind of I started listening to country blues and then African music and a bit of jazz. My mum had this amazing record collection, and then when I was 16 or 17, I heard Peter Green, a compilation of Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, and this would have been in the early 90s. Never heard of the guy before, and I think the first song I heard was. I can't see the dots on this guitar. Anyway, so Peter Green, and just that beautiful guitar sound and minimal playing. He wasn't showboating. This is early 90s when you had Slash and these great rock bands, and Peter Green was just, when I heard him, with my young ears, I was just struck by the clean sounds, not distorted or fuzzy, and minimal playing, and just a beautiful, when he played. Just beautiful, incredible, great improviser as well. I used to smoke a bit of the exotic cigarette when I was 17, and just listen to live at the Boston Tea Party, and the track Rattlesnake Shake, and then and the improvisation would last for 25 minutes, and I'm smoking this exotic cigarette and just lying up staring at the ceiling, and this song's going for 25 minutes. It's incredible. I was like, wow, it's as good as Miles Davis, and John Coltrane, it's amazing. So
number 3, and
number 2.
No, number 2 is it already?
Yeah,
sorry, jumping ahead. Number 2 for me. Okay, I'm going to qualify this by saying his rhythm playing, specifically his rhythm playing, Jimi Hendrix.
Oh,
okay, everybody goes mad about Jimi Hendrix's lead playing. It was fabulous. Can't say I've got any time at all for the feedbacky stuff. Much. Wonderful to watch him set fire to a guitar at Monterey Pop. Amazing video, amazing spectacle, but not
even now.
But not what I choose to listen to. But his rhythm playing on the first 4 Jimi Hendrix Experience albums. Oh, it's magnificent. It's fabulous. It's intricate. It's delicate. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So I definitely put Hendrix in there. I'm not saying Hendrix was a great rhythm player and a lousy lead player. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying his lead playing, fantastic. His rhythm playing, off the scale.
Because he had all that experience with Curtis Knight, and he went on the Chitlin circuit.
He worked hard.
And this is a thing, I was talking about this with a friend actually, is when he turned up to play with Cream. Can you imagine Eric Clapton? Eric Clapton was a great blues guitar player. He'd been listening to John Mayall's blues collection. But here's a cat that's come from America, from the Chitlin circuit, and has got all these, little triads, and and Clapton's just like, what's, Clapton's just out of his depth because he hasn't got that experience that Hendrix has come from all these amazing R&B bands.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, we haven't even talked about the fact that he was a highly introverted man who was also an extraordinary showman.
Yes.
That's a different thing. But I'm specifically talking, for the purpose of this video, about his rhythm playing, which is magnificent. If you listen to the rhythm playing on Boulder's Love, for me, it sets a high bar that pretty much nobody can even blow at.
Incredible.
So your number 2.
So my number 2, I'm going to fast forward to somebody that I'm more or less in the last 10 years I've discovered, and I'm going to take this guitar sound, guitar string, sorry, down.
Drop D.
Here we go. Marc Ribot.
Yeah.
Marc Ribot. And this guy is freaking amazing, man. He's like kind of everything you didn't think the guitar should do or could do, And he does it to an incredible. It's kind of like he's listened to Eric Dolphy, who's this avant-garde sax player, like kind of like Coltrane, but out in the stratosphere. He's just, he unfortunately died when he was young. But he had this very avant-garde, kind of out there, angular playing, and kind of Marc Ribot, has divulged, eating all this kind of stuff and just put it out.
So while you're in that groove, but coming slightly back towards the centre stream, you've got to think about Greg Koch.
Right. Yes.
Greg Koch. Who's not quite as out there as Marc Ribot, but still pushes the limits and mixes up the metaphors all the time.
Yeah.
And the other guy that I think in the same kind of vein is that acoustic specialist who plays this very strange acoustic instrument that's a hybrid sitar and guitar called Harry Manx.
Harry Manx, right. Yeah.
And his music quite easy listening by comparison, but the tone and the sound he gets and this crossover between Indian raga and Americana. On fantastic instruments that have got extraordinary tone, brilliantly recorded through really expensive microphones and valve preamps and all that, blah, blah, blah. And the sound is just wonderful.
Yeah, and the thing is with Marc Ribot, sorry, Mark, if you're listening to this, it's, incredible. He's because he played with Tom Waits, yeah? He did all the Tom Waits stuff, and then he's like studied all the Cuban masters and really kind of basically arranged Cuban music for guitar, electric guitar. And then he was in the Lounge Lizards, where he was doing these really crazy, out there, angular, avant-garde solos. He's kind of like the guitarist anti-hero. He's probably, one of my favourite guitar players. It's kind of like, I'd love to see him, Marc Ribot, work with Ry Cooder.
Right.
I think that's an album that's never been made, that should be made. To see those two together would be incredible.
So number 3. Okay.
Number 3.
And while we're going a bit angular, a gentleman, a very lovely man who left us early this year, founder of a British band that weren't particularly successful in their own time, but then became a major influence on era after era of old bands. Andy Gill of the Gang of Four. You might not have heard of the Gang of Four.
I'm nodding my head, but I don't.
If you listen to the Gang of Four stuff, there are probably 2 British guitarists who are very, very hard to imitate, who've really got their own voice, and it's nothing to do with the blues bollocks that I play. It's kind of English. The first one is Richard Thompson, who is a international treasure.
Yeah.
Andy Gill's the other one. It is quite impossible to play like either of them.
Yeah.
It's quite impossible. Actually, you can get warm with Richard Thompson. You can't go near Andy Gill. It's so angular and so distinctive. It's quite laden with quite far left politics and all the rest of it. So it's got some baggage with it, but and it's not an easy listen. It really isn't an easy listen.
Yeah.
But my God, as a distinctive guitar player, I mean, he made a major mark on the world through his own activity and through all his followers. Lots of the American bands in particular, everyone from Nine Inch Nails onwards cites him as a major influence.
Wow. That's really, really.
So and unfortunately he passed early this year. Nothing to do with COVID.
Right. Okay, so my third favourite guitarist, I would actually say Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I'm not going to say that because that would be boring and everyone says that. So what I'm going to say instead...
That would be boring.
That would be boring. But what I'm going to say instead is a guy called Davy Graham.
Oh.
Now, Davy Graham, let me just tune my guitar because he invented the tuning called Dadgad.
Oh.
D, A, D, G, and then A. And then D. The really sad thing about Davy Graham is, he invented this incredible guitar sound, and people like Paul Simon would go and check him out in London at the the folk clubs.
But yeah, Sean Renborn, even back then, they scored points off him too, didn't they?
Yeah, Jimmy Page basically, renamed his songs and
what you mean?
Yeah, so I mean that is all that Dadgad thing, and Davy Graham was he went out to Morocco, and the whole Dadgad tuning. It's kind of that sitar sort of vibe to it, and so he was somebody that came to the guitar world, brought something new,
fabulous,
something original. He was very original,
and all out of an acoustic guitar through a microphone. No, not even DI, no effects in those days. Nothing. Just and he really used to push a lot of sound out of an acoustic guitar as well.
Yeah,
and accompanied himself.
The sad thing about it is he ended up his last days. I think, somebody discovered him and put him on tour, but generally he was just playing in Soho in a Chinese restaurant. So it's such a sad that this kind of giant.
So
guitar,
keeping on an upbeat, morbid theme, number 4 from me, Joe Pass, who claimed to fame really as Ella Fitzgerald's guitarist, and she was a big star. The early '60s when jazz was still the popular music of choice amongst the sophisticates, and he was her guitar player. But he'd been playing for years, always playing a typical Gibson ES-175 jazz guitar. But the reason I choose him is actually not for his electric playing, but for his acoustic playing. I've heard some of his acoustic work, and it's terrifying. Mm-hmm. It's terrifying because, Tommy Emmanuel will very often play 2.5, maybe even 3 parts going on at once. Mm-hmm. Well, Joe Pass does the same thing, but instead of there being discernible as parts, they're all stuck together. So he kind of does it within the chord, but he does runs and slides and runs that have got 3 notes in them, moving in different intervals simultaneously. I mean, it is the most extraordinary feat, and it's not clever technical hard dark jazz music. It's actually acoustic guitar with brilliant, beautiful, innovative harmonies and rhythms in it. It's an amazing guitar player. Yeah,
and he went through different stages, didn't he? And I think it was an incredible story because he was a heroin addict. He was in prison. Yeah. And then some patron gave him a Fender Jazzmaster guitar. Yeah, and there's some early YouTube videos of him playing Fender Jazzmaster because that's all he had. He'd come out of prison with no guitar.
Wow.
And I guess his patron thought, I'll go in a shop, can you give me a jazz guitar? Fender Jazzmaster, which is not a great...
It's not a jazz guitar.
No. And, and he had this amazing style. And from what I was actually, when I went to music college, I was taught by somebody that was, I think, taught by him or something. And so I learned this really simple way. Well, I'm still learning jazz. I'm still trying to play jazz at the moment. But I learned a simple way of learning jazz, which was, boil all the chords, all these, E7 sharp 5, flat 9, whatever. Boil them down to dominant, major, and minor. That's it. That's all you need to know. Is a chord a major? Is it a minor chord? Or is it a dominant? And that was, Joe Pass had this really
however altered it might be, it's still one of those 3.
It's a dominant. So if it's an E7 sharp 9, it's a dominant. If it's an E7 sharp 9 sharp 5, it's a dominant. Right. If it's an E7, it's a dominant.
Right. Okay.
And so and when you listen to Joe Pass, it sounds so complicated, but it's actually it's quite simple. The way he thinks is very, very simplistic, and that's why he's a great teacher. If you can get hold of one of his tuitional tapes. he's an amazing teacher.
Wow.
You know, because of that simplicity.
So you're number 4 then.
Okay, well, my number 4 is of course going to be Mr. Ford. Mr. Robben Ford. As much as I want to be cool and say somebody like Ry Cooder, because Ry Cooder, you know, is my hero. He's my mentor. He's my master. He's my everything. Ry Cooder, really. But I don't have a slide guitar, so. But Robben Ford was somebody I discovered in the early '90s, and he. First of all, the reason I liked him was he had this incredible, beautiful tone, this blooming tone, which I later found. I thought it was a guitar because he had this strange Fender Robben Ford Esprit Elite, whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a guitar that was making that sound, and it wasn't. Apart from his fingers, it was
the guitar. The guitar Ramon is talking about is a slightly larger bodied chambered guitar. Looks a bit like a sort of squashed up 335. It's got 2 humbuckers on it. Quite a nice neck. It's either an ebony or a Brazilian rosewood fingerboard. It's a very nice, very well made, expensively made guitar. It's not at all Fender. It is a Fender. It's got Fender written on it, but it's made like a Gibson.
Yeah, and he came out with this album, Talk to Your Daughter. You know, and he had. So basically, you know, when Robben Ford was on it, he had a kind of a golden period. I don't want to take anything away from what he's doing now, but when Robben Ford was on it, he was like mystic. It was like mystical. It was like he was pulling these notes out, which, you know, I'd never heard that combination before. That tone,
and he was doing it with an extraordinary tone. Again, this blooming tone, Dumble, I know all that stuff.
It was magical.
The whole combination, and then. I
mean, I didn't like the shoulder pads.
What's the slow blues on that album? They ain't got nothing but the blues.
He got the change of a nickel.
Now, you know, today we all have the luxury if we hear a solo that we like and it's really, really quick, we can stick it into Amazing Slowdowner or something. We can slow it down.
Yeah.
Try slowing down the riff, right? That he plays about 6 bars into that solo, right? The ascending, the sort of gleaming. It's like trickling water, right?
Yeah.
You try slowing it down,
and it probably doesn't make any sense.
I would go as far as to say you virtually can't, right? I've tried because I'm so desperate to learn what that is. I've got no idea.
Yeah.
And it sounds beautiful, but it's in the area you're talking about of that half whole, bringing in the diminished.
Yeah. He the story is. He went to a gig and he saw Larry Coryell playing a Super 400 and playing all this half diminished scale, and he went up to Larry Coryell and he said, "What are you doing there?" And so Larry Coryell said, "Well, you know, when I hear that chord there, I play this." And so that's where he got it from. He went up, you know, that's what you had to do. There was no YouTube, there was no books. Well, there were books. They had the Bible, but you know, you'd go up to an artist and say, "What are you doing, mate?" Because that's how you know, there was no YouTube explaining it. Nobody was doing, you know. So but he's my number 4 man because he was mystical.
Well, I'm so glad you chose him because I mean I wanted to choose him as well because I think he's fabulous player. I've seen him play lots of times. Met him once or twice, but you know. You meet somebody at a gig, it's not really the kind of circumstance. No one's going to be each other's best friend. It's more or less, you know, respect and pass away quickly. Anyone.
But he would have appreciated that.
But anyone who's a Klingon, you know, just take my word for it. Don't. But I'm glad you got me out of a hole there because I've only got one left, and of course I have to choose the one guitarist that doesn't come from this planet, in terms of his playing.
Wow. Give me another clue. Give me a clue.
Well, it's just there are all the other guitarists, all of whom play something recognisable, and then there's this other guitarist who is simply the finest guitarist I've ever experienced. Although he has veered towards quite easy listening in his later years.
Oh, does he play? Is he famous for a Stratocaster?
He does play a Stratocaster. It is, of course, Jeff Beck. And if you have the opportunity to see him, I had the luxury last year going out and working on Eric Clapton's crew at the Crossroads Festival, almost exactly a year ago this week. And there were many fantastic things that happened during that week, fantastic things that happened to me, but one of the best things was that I was in the auditorium after seeing the artists that I was working with do their sound checks.
Yeah.
And the last sound check of the night before, the Thursday night before the festival, was Jeff Beck. So I sat in an auditorium about 4 rows back with 6 other people in the entire place, and Jeff Beck didn't just do a sound check, he went through the whole bloody set in front of me. It was a private concert. And what him and it's Vinny Colaiuto, his drummer?
Vinny Colaiuto, the best drummer in the world.
They then had probably a very, very capable female bass player. They had
Tao Wilkenfield.
No.
Not Tao?
No.
Okay.
And it wasn't the black lady either, who's a very funky player. It wasn't her either, it was another one. But they had this probably very capable bass player. I had no idea what she did. They had a beautiful, beautiful blonde woman on cello. Had no idea what she was doing, except she did provide a drone, I think, in a couple of songs. I'm not putting her down, it's just there was simply no need or space in the mix. They then had the embarrassment of Johnny Depp, who's clearly...
I like Johnny Depp.
Well, who's clearly matey with Jeff Beck.
He's a great guy.
And certainly when I was sitting in the audience the next night and watching it, the Americans in the audience were very impressed that a Hollywood movie star was on this stage.
But he's a cool dude.
No, he was a complete turkey, I'm afraid. He was absolute turkey. He swaggered on stage with a guitar down here, right?
Love it.
Right, all of you out there, okay? Would you please post a comment if you can play the guitar down there, and send us an audio of you playing the guitar down there. I'll give you a clue. You can't, right? However bloody cool it looks, it's not a Hoover. It's a musical instrument. So. He was playing it down there, but the pièce de résistance for me was when they played Brush with the Blues.
Oh, right.
Right, now we know how it goes. You dum 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 da 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 da. Okay, what does Johnny come on stage with? He brought all his vintage guitars on stage.
Right.
He had some fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
What did he bring on for that number?
Yeah. Dan Armstrong.
No.
Taxi?
You said you weren't going to say what it was.
No, that was in the last video.
He comes on with an electric 12-string. And the guy on
pretty weird.
The guy on the sound desk did the right thing. Faders down to 0, and he could wriggle around on stage with the electric 12-string just below his right knee. I mean, I'm sorry, what a prat, right? In the meantime, Jeff Beck continued. Him and Colaiuta produced the sound of 50 men by themselves, and Jeff Beck goes from a whisper beyond a shout to kind of flying off planet. With a flick of his finger, and back again. The dynamics of the man are.
But did Johnny Depp do a solo or anything?
No, I don't think anybody can recall anything except this sort of writhing idiot.
I don't know. I think he's a cool dude, man. I think I think he's. I think but
stick to the movies.
Yes.
I think I have to say Jeff Beck has distinguished himself more in movies, like when he was in the band playing in the bar.
Okay.
That Schwarzenegger and DeVito walk into in Twins.
Was it? Oh yeah.
Right, Jeff Beck's in that.
Yeah,
I think Jeff Beck in that single move distinguished himself more on film than Depp will ever on the stage with guitar. But nevertheless, anyway, so Beck did this private audition for me and a couple of mates, and it was just
phenomenal.
I mean, everything he does. Clearly he does some stuff that we can all do, but most of the stuff he does is just beyond impossible.
And the thing about it is he's no spring chicken, and he can still play anyone under the table. Do you know what I mean? He's just getting better. He's
utterly magnificent. And clearly he comes from a different place, he thinks from another place, and by all accounts, he's not really interested in playing the guitar, he just wants to work on hot rodding his cars all day. This is almost his second love, and he's transcendental. So, that's me. That's your number 5.
Right. Okay, well, my number 5, I'm going to go back to my mum, because when I was growing up, my mum had this amazing record collection which had blues and jazz, George Benson, who I love, but it also had some world music, some South American music, and cause my father was from Argentina, and basically I discovered African music, and then I got into a player called Alpha Touré, and Alpha Touré was from Mali. He was from Bamako in Mali, which is in the Sahara Desert in West Africa, and he plays with just the thumb and his first finger. Unfortunately, he passed away many years ago. I think in the 90s, or early 2000s. But he just had this incredible guitar style, which was, again, I like, somebody like Davy Graham, where they're just coming from a different place, a different angle, and so let's do a little jamming, eh? So he just had this, really cool, funky sort of rhythm. Everything he would do just had this amazing sort of...
It sounds like there's a lot of sunshine and happiness in the sound.
Yeah, a lot of it was like that, but he had some kind of real dark sort of... So he'd do these kind of, and he was very influenced, I think, by John Lee Hooker, because he'd got some in Mali. He had a record player, and he was hip to the blues guys, So he mixed a bit of American blues with the indigenous music of Mali, which was also had a bit of an Arabic influence because they're Muslims and they speak Arabic, and the Arabs had been there 1,000 years before, 1,500 years ago, And then he did this album with Raikuda called Talking Timbuktu. With the money, there's a famous story with the money he made off of that album, he went back to his village and he planted all these tomato plants and sank wells in the desert in order to give back to his community, which was an amazing thing he did with the royalties from that album, So it was an amazing guy.
Well, especially amazing now, in context, yeah. The stuff that's going on in Mali now and Chad and around Bamako in particular,
yeah,
it's pretty grim.
Yes,
you've got the resurgence of the, I've forgotten what, the
Al-Qaeda
related group in Sub-Sahara and all the rest of it, and it's back to difficult times for a country that doesn't need more difficult times.
Exactly, but the music there they've got, it's incredible music, and so I kind of use that, and which is really kind of cool, is I mixed, because I was really into Mark Knopfler, when I was in early, On Every Street was an album I bought when I was 17, was it Calling Elvis?
Nice.
Almost was kind of try and mix Alpha Touré and Marc Knopfler together.
Why not?
I can't remember. I used to do these things like. Impression, but try and mix a bit of Dire Straits and Alpha Touré, make a bit of a mishmash. So that, guys, is our 5 favourite guitar players
that we can think of at the moment. There's at least 500 more each if you gave us a piece of paper and a pencil and a day to think about it.
But here's the deal, guys. Now what we want you to do in the comments is please write your 5 favourite guitar players so that we can all share this, and it's going to be amazing just to hear what your 5 favourite guitar players are. Surprise us.
And hopefully you can be, if you do even say why, you can be slightly more succinct than our blever. But thank you. Good luck.
And it's goodbye from
Bob, and it's goodbye from
me. Take care. Bye.
Bye.